Welcome to a Leader's Journey podcast. I'm your host, Joel Gunn, and today I have with me Doug Carlberg, a person I like to consider a friend, a mentor, and my former boss at two companies.
That's for sure.
So we go way back. Doug actually became my boss's boss 1989, and for whatever reason, I tell people there's two kinds of mentors. One that you spend a lot of time with, and then there's guys like you. And you did a huge favor to me, whether you knew it or not. I guess I was 21 when we met. I had just finished my electronics engineering degree. And for whatever reason, you invested in me heavily. I know there was 1 year I counted, you had sent me to over 200 hours of leadership training, team building, Lean, Six Sigma, whatever.
You were one of many, but the money paid off well with you. That's for sure.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. And that was one of the things I really admired about, I don't know if that was a corporation thing or just your leadership style, but you had a dozen or two of us that you invested heavily in. And, quite honestly, and I tell people this, 30 years later, it was some of those investments you made in me then, I'm still able to sow into other people's life now. And so thank you for that. I've told you that before, but I wanted to be on record.
Well, I appreciate it. And back in 1989, I was picked up from Harris. At the time, I was working for Tracor Aerospace down in Austin. After the Berlin Wall came down, the funding came out of defense, and they were a defense contractor, so it was time for me to get in commercial. And I was lucky enough to get picked up by Harris Corporation. And as a result, I was brought in as VP of operations. I'm supposed to be based in California. And I was just telling you the story here a minute ago, and the movers were actually picking up and putting all my stuff in the moving truck when my new boss called me and said, "Oh, by the way, we got a problem, Doug. We've got some issues in San Antonio. The plant manager just left, and I need you to go down there and find a replacement and get it back on course again." And at the time, I said, "Wow, that's a great way to start a new job." But it was a great career. And at the time, I realized that I had a much younger crew in the plant in San Antonio. I also had a plant up in Montreal, Canada, another one out in California, which is an older crew. And I said, if I'm going to turn this division around, I got to do it in San Antonio because they don't have this non-invented here syndrome. Mm-hmm. They can make things happen. You were just one of the few that I selected at the time to turn that division around, which we did. Yeah, we went from the worst division in Harris Corporation to the best division in Harris Corporation within 5 years.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I remember when you got there, one of our main products took us 180 days to get the typical order through the factory. By the time
then it was late. It was late at the time, even at that time frame.
Yeah, and then when you and I, 12 years later, 12 years for me, 10 years for you, you spun off one of the business units, and we can talk more about that. But by that 10 years, we were getting that same product done in 18 hours.
Yep.
So it was a crazy 10 years.
Just-in-time manufacturing. We applied all the tools in our toolkit that we had to learn along the journey.
Mm-hmm. It was a lot of fun. And it's still one of my favorite times looking back over my career. I still have very fond memories of the craziness. It
was. And a lot of people like you came out of that thing and went in different places, and it made a difference in manufacturing.
Yeah. And then even beyond, I've spent probably the last 20 years outside of manufacturing and still been able to apply a lot of the team building principles and some of the others.
The principles can apply to Lean Hospital. You can take it to financing. The back office for Bank of America is an example.
I've leaned out nonprofits.
All the tools apply. You just need how to retool them a little bit.
Yeah. So just to get to know you a little bit better, can you share a story from your past, Doug, that really impacted your leadership style?
Well, there's quite a few. I mean, the first one, how I got in manufacturing, was kind of unique. I got hired out of the University of Arizona with a degree in aeronautical and mechanical engineering. And the reason I had 2 degrees, I couldn't find a job as an aeronautical engineer at the time, because at the time the SST program, the supersonic transport program, got canned by the government. Anyway, so I got picked up by a General Electric company, and I went there on their engineering intern program. And the first job I had, I designed a piece of equipment that I was really proud on, got it put down on the floor, and lo and behold, it didn't quite perform the way it was supposed to perform. And my boss says, "You're going to live on the floor until this machine runs properly." And I got down there and I went, "Wow, manufacturing's kind of cool." So I applied for their manufacturing management program, which was a 2-year intern program, which it was basically a master's degree in industrial engineering, a classroom, and 4 different assignments in different areas of GE. And even locating, I located in 2 years, I located in 3 different divisions within GE.
Wow.
So that's how I got involved in manufacturing. And with that, I started off learning about quality systems. I learned about how cash flow was really important at General Electric Company, and a lot of good programs. And I worked for GE for 13 years. And GE is a little bit like IBM. You know what IBM stands for? I've been moved. Okay. Well, GE at the time, if you were on your management program, you were in an assignment probably 2 to 3 years, and then you got 3 choices to relocate and to develop your career. So a lot of my management training came out of General Electric Company. At the same time, I got out of the military when I went back to college to get my degree, and I stayed in the reserves. So I got a lot of training through the military, and I retired out of the reserves as a chief warrant officer after 18 years. So it's a combination of what I've learned in the industry and what I've learned getting trained out of the military.
Mm-hmm. It seems to be difficult for the people I've met that grew up in military, for them to transition into non-military. Did you find that difficult at all, or?
Well, I mean, it's a different leadership style, you know, and I guess the difference is in the military, most of the people underneath you, the enlisted people, besides below the NCOs, non-commissioned officers, are anywhere from 18 to 23, and it's more of a leadership role. And here again, how do you make it work? You got to develop the NCO Corps, the non-commissioned officer corps, and the military does a great job on that through a number of different programs. But here again, it's you got to get people that can follow you in your leadership, and it's the same dealing with corporate America. You know, you can't dictate how to lead. You've got to have people believe in you that were willing to follow you.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I tell people when I'm talking about you in particular. You strike me as a person, and my experience has been you're very loyal to people, and I think that encourages those same people to be loyal to you.
Well, it helps for sure. I mean, it's identifying really and getting to know the people, getting to know your team, getting to know your names. And, you know, when I go into a factory and I'm getting a tour with some of their senior leadership, and they go around and they know all the employees' names, that tells you something. If you go in and it's like it's a blank, I don't know who that person is, they just, you know, it's understanding they're all part of the team.
That's interesting. Now that you mention it, after I left, after we split off that company, I left and went into a consulting practice. Now that you bring it up, the companies I go into over the last couple of decades, that the leadership knows the people's name, very different culture.
It is.
Very different culture. They tend to have less turnover. They tend to be more creative. That's an interesting thought. I hadn't put that together before, but.
And one of the things I do as a volunteer, I'm an examiner for the Shingo Prize, which is based on the Toyota production system. And I'm also an examiner for the Association for Manufacturing Excellence, their Manufacturing Excellence Award. So I get a chance to get into a lot of different sites as a volunteer and get to see some of the best companies in North America and some of the best companies internationally, to be honest with you. Ireland is just amazing what they've done with the Shingle Prize. But make a long story short, one of the best companies that I've ever seen here that's closest to Toyota is a company in Salt Lake City called O.C. Tanner. And it's a reward and recognition, privately held, but just an amazing company, how they can totally engage their workforce.
And what do you think makes their culture different than pretty much everywhere else you go?
Well, with the Mormons in Salt Lake, it's kind of interesting because you go into the different cells and they've got all these flags from all the different cultures around the world, and they all kind of blend together in there, which is really kind of a little United Nations. And it's here again, it's empowerment of the people.
Wow.
And getting their involvement and listening to them and letting them run as self-directed work teams.
Yeah, that was honestly, that was probably one of the reasons I had so much fun when you were overseeing the San Antonio operation, was because you were big on that.
Oh, yeah.
And in fact, we even joked after a few years, we had to form a team to manage the teams, because there was so much going on.
Oh, yeah, I know. I can remember we had a shutdown and we were going to do a rearrangement, and I flew in, I'm back from California, and I sat down with the team and they briefed me on what they were going to do. And I said, well, take me out and show me. And they said, well, we've already done it.
You gave us a lot of leeway back then.
Yeah,
so.
we did it. But, I mean, it's just amazing if you empower people what they can do.
Yeah, and I know companies that would die for their employees owning the process or owning, their work output. And yet that just seems so natural as the culture that we have.
And that's actually the secret sauce for Toyota. It's really their people engagement. I mean, you can have all the tools in the world, but unless people embrace those tools and utilize those tools and make a difference, they have to have ownership and pride in what they do.
Well, and I think it's been said, one of the most powerful things in Toyota is anybody can walk over there and hit the red button and
shut the line down.
Because they're not happy with how something's going or the quality or, and there's from what I've heard, and you probably know way better than I do. From what I've heard, there's like no repercussion. It's part of the culture. It's like you're the hero.
You're the hero.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, if they can't fix it within a period of time, the next alarm goes off and the office empties out, and they've got everybody down there in the line, and we're going to fix this problem.
Wow, that's so cool. I know a little bit of your story just because we've been connected over the years and kept in touch. The audience, it's easy for us to talk about our successes, right?
Oh, yeah.
But a lot of times the learnings and the difficulties. Do you have any challenges that you've overcome, or you've lived through bad economies, you've been all kinds of stuff.
The first one was when I bought M2 Global Technology from Harris Corporation, and at the time I just bought a production cell, 38 people, didn't have any HR. Didn't have any IT. I just had a production cell.
Didn't have accounting.
And it didn't have accounting. So I bought this product line, and I get up in the morning and I look in the mirror and I say, well, who am I going to delegate to today? Make everything happen. I'm saying, well, it's got to be me. and a lot of people in senior management and corporations, they kind of grow up into a silo. To be able to roll up your sleeves and make that thing happen is easier said than done. And here again, I go back and look at the training I had in the military and also the training I had at General Electric Company. It all paid off. And I started off as an enlisted person in the Army and worked my way up into a chief warrant officer. So I kind of learned the hard way.
Yeah.
I saw what I liked in leadership and what I didn't like in leadership, and I tried to really pick up the good things that I saw and apply it in how I did my leadership.
I want to stay on that topic, and then we'll get back to challenges here in a minute. Talk to me about bad leadership as you even in the Army, growing up through the Army ranks and the corporate ranks, and then the entrepreneurial ranks, you're an auditor. You see, you've been exposed to probably more leadership styles than anybody I know.
Well, and that's a little bit of difference between O.C. Tanner, which is privately held. They've been on this journey now for 20, 25 years, and it's just amazing. I go back every year and actually facilitate a workshop for the Association for Manufacturing Excellence there. And what I do for them is I actually will do an assessment from where they were the year before and where they are this year. Mm-hmm. And it's just amazing the growth they've got and continuous. An example, you and I came out of Harris Corporation. And we had a great leader in Ricardo Diaz. Mm-hmm. And I learned a lot from Ricardo. And he actually stayed on my board at M2 Global for a number of years. And he helped me get M2 Global to where it is today. And but if you go back and look at where we were at Harris in the Farallon division, 3 years after Ricardo and I left, and Guy Newman retired, it went in the opposite direction. Mm-hmm. So it's here again. People were trying to go after the bottom line because of corporate America, but it's not all about the bottom line. I mean, you can really get the bottom line there if you really engage the people and cut out the waste. Mm-hmm. The 7 areas of waste is a critical part of any company, and a lot of people don't understand what the 7 areas of waste are. They don't understand what a value stream is. Mm-hmm. And it's a shame that more people at corporate leadership really don't take the time to learn what's great about Toyota.
So you mentioned waste. Somebody in the viewing audience may be running a small mom and pop operation, maybe them and 3 employees. And then somebody else viewing this, may be a vice president overseeing, 3 campuses like you used to with thousands of employees. Is it are the waste the same waste in all the big or small?
Oh yeah, it is. And basically understanding what's causing the waste. Mm-hmm. And I'll give you an example. Some of our electronic components, it's a drop-in, and we make a housing and we put all the material in it for an isolator circulator, and then we do a cover. Well, I bought a machine to basically make the housing, and I was getting the covers made on the outside. And I was wondering why these covers are so expensive. So I bought a piece of equipment, brought it in, and I realized that when they made the cover, at the end, we had a little tit in the center of it that would come up, and they were taking it with emery cloth and getting it off. And I went back and I said, all we do is put a cover on this thing. So I went over to engineering and I said, can we put and we had 2 holes in it so we could use a spanner wrench to torque it down. Can I put a third hole in the middle and get rid of this? They said, yeah. I cut the cost in half. It's so here again, it's just really understanding what's costing you money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had that happen with a supplier I think you guys still use today, packaging. The plastic trays.
Oh yeah.
And the husband started the company, and he was a genius at being able to think 3-dimensionally in packaging and really understood how to build packaging from scratch. And so instead of me going in and mandating, I said, look, all this has to do is get these parts from here to there safely, and it's got to be anti-static plastic, and that's about it. You tell me the best way to package this stuff, and can we come up with a common size? And I let him go to town, and he's like, well, if I do this, then it'll improve the rigidity, and I can go with a thinner plastic, and greatly reduced our costs that we'd gotten quoted anywhere else in the U.S. or
and
Mexico.
We're still using that supplier today.
Yeah, and so lots of those kinds of stories where we let there was a fixture that some of the engineering team had designed and built in Germany. You still have it in your factory as more of a paperweight than anything. I saw it there last time I was there. But then we built these little cheap fixtures and mostly talk to the people on the floor, like, how's this process work, and what about this, and what's the cheapest way we could design something, and just the way we countersunk the holes, and the way we just did everything where it just couldn't help but come together easily, and the engineering team that designed the fancy fixture, in California was upset that us local San Antonio guys would take it on ourselves to try to improve the process, and that fixture cost literally like $10,000 to build. This costs like $37, So.
And we're still using that $37 fixture today. The other thing that really paid off, and we started it over in the hair stays, and we brought it on to M2 Global. We would do continuous improvement events, which are called Kaizen events, and we'd bring in some of our suppliers to participate in that. And that paid off so well. In some cases, we actually asked them if they wanted us to come into their shop and help do a Kaizen event in their shop on our products. And that's another way you can really reduce your cost.
Get into the supply line.
Yeah.
That's a good idea. So back to challenges. You've had your fair share. Any you want to share with the audience, obstacles you've overcome?
Well, I mean, the 9/11, where before 9/11 we were blowing and going, and within 6 months we basically, our sales dropped in half.
Wow.
Mainly because a lot of people had already overstocked because of Y2K, and then 9/11 hit. And we had to restructure the company. I had to rethink the company. I had a lot of excess capacity in my machining capability. I had a background in aerospace, and I said, I'm going to figure out how to get into the aerospace business. It took me 4 years to finally get an opportunity to quote at Lockheed Martin in Fort Worth. And I actually bid a piece of metal, which was a shim for the price of the metal, which gave me my supplier number. And then 4 years later, I was their small subcontractor of the year for Lockheed Martin Aeronautics.
Wow. On
the Bell side of the business, it took me almost 5.5 years to get into Bell Helicopter. They put me in 2022. I was selected as their supplier of the year at M2 Global for Bell Helicopter. They put me in for Region 6 Government Small Contractor of the Year, which we won. And then as a result, I competed against the other 10 regions and at the national level, and we ended up being the National Small Government Subcontractor of the Year. So
and that was just last year or year
22,
before? Yeah.
22. So it's here again, building a relationship. But I think the biggest challenge I had, that was one. How do I get from commercial to defense? The other biggest issue, I was up in Connecticut visiting Sikorsky, and my wife calls me up in the morning. I was just getting up in the morning, and my phone kind of vibrated. I was in the bathroom. My phone vibrated off the counter, the dresser, and I was thinking my parents were older, and I was thinking something happened to one of my parents. And I pick up, and my wife Patty says, "It's bad." And I'm going, "What's bad?" I said, "We had a fire," and the fire was contained in a special process area. Some PVC exhaust vents caught on fire because of a heater unit. Well, when PVC burns, one of the byproducts is hydrochloric acid, and a lot of dust, a lot of soot, and hydrochloric acid on machine tools is not a good thing. So we were completely down. The good news is the electronic side of the business was in another building, so that side was up and running. But here again, am I going to lose my customer base? Or what am I going to do? What's it going to take to get me back up and operational? And so I had to fly back from the East Coast to San Antonio. It was the longest day of my life, trying to figure out how bad it was. The insurance company, at the time, we had great insurance with SWBC, but the insurance company said, well, it's going to take you at least 6 months to be up and operational. And I'm going, I'm going to lose my customer base if I do that. So hired a company to come in to basically recover everything we had, clean everything up, and they were working, and I got them to work 24/7. So my wife at the time had just retired from Valero. I got her to come back in, and she was running 12-hour shifts in the morning, 7 days a week, and then I was running 12-hour shifts at night. And we got back up and operational within within 90 days versus 6 months.
Wow.
And the insurance company was totally amazed.
Yeah.
But here again, it's going back and talking to your customers, identifying what their priorities were. In some cases, I had to subcontract stuff out, lost money on it, but I got the customer happy. And as a result, that helped grow the business.
Yeah.
It really did.
Yeah. At the time, how much was the fab side of the business, like total dollars? Half or a third? Or?
Well, and they were a big supplier to the electronic side of the business. If you think
that's
of
true,
it,
yeah.
If you think about it,
Yeah.
it was a combination of both. But I mean, back then, the electronic side of the business, the fab shop was their,
was their supplier. Yeah.
Was their supplier.
Yeah. So you actually, and you were just in time.
Yeah.
With very little inventory between your fab shop and your electronics side.
So it was.
Everything was at jeopardy.
So it was, at the same time, I had to figure out how to outsource things at the same time, getting the operation up and running again. So, and we did not lay off anybody.
Really?
We kept everybody on payroll.
Wow.
And partly the insurance company paid to help them clean up. But here again, that's how I kept employees. And as a result, they stayed with M2 Global.
Now, I know when I came to visit you a year or so ago, I caught a glimpse of a couple of employees. And then in your, you sold M2 Global this summer. Congrats on that. But in your farewell video, I saw faces in there. It's like, I remember when that guy's been there for 25 years,
Yeah.
So.
And even some of the ones that retire come back part-time.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Yeah, that's cool. Through those failures, not really failures of your own, right? 9/11 wasn't your failure. The fire wasn't your failure. But were there any particular things that you learned that you've been able to apply, or would be encouragement to people?
Well, I think you got to pay attention to the market, where the market's going. You got to improvise and overcome, and you've got to adjust. I mean, it's just like, where's technology going? Are you staying ahead of technology? And that's key. You can make the best boogie whip, but if horse and carriage is going away, what good is it going to do you with the best whip in the market?
And you guys have adapted well over the years.
And the technology has changed quite a bit, And the products predominantly we make in the microwave space for communications and radar systems, that technology has been around for 40, 50 years. But it's changing. The frequencies are changing. The packaging is changing. You constantly have to think, where's it going next?
Yeah, 5G, I would imagine, way smaller packaging, way lower signal strengths, probably way cheaper components.
Yeah.
So
as an example, we're working right now with Collins Aerospace because of the 5G and the landing systems through Collins Aerospace. They've got to retrofit all these airplanes. And we have come up with a ceramic filter, which before everything was metal. And right now it looks like we're going to be getting a contract for 20,000 of these ceramic filters.
Wow. Congrats. One of the things is, as leaders, people tend to think, well, you own your own company, or you're a vice president in a big corporation, or, whatever leadership role you're in. People tend to think, well, you've got a great life because you're a leader.
I wish that was the case. I think it may be a little easier in corporate America, but in corporate America, you also have a lot of pressure on you all the time to perform.
You're not the guy.
But when you own your own company, it's like owning a restaurant. It's 24/7, 7 days a week, and you're worrying about cash flow. You're worrying about making payroll. You're trying to figure out where the technology is going, what equipment you need to buy.
How do you, as a leader, what's Doug's secret sauce for maintaining your emotional and mental health through all that?
Well, I've got a great wife who kind of gets me focused where I need to get focused when I get off course. But you got to have hobbies too. I love to scuba dive. I love to ski. Matter of fact, a lot of people don't realize that I've actually been a volunteer ski patrol person for a number of years. And I started in college. There was a new ski area starting up, and I grew up in New England. I knew how to ski, and I was a lifeguard, so I had first aid. And they said, well, this new ski area is starting. They're looking to train people how to be on a ski patrol. And, being in college, you don't have a lot of money. And I'm thinking, and free skiing? Free skiing? Okay, I'll do that. So that's how I started off. But, but when you get out there, and you get out there first thing in the morning after that slope is groomed, it's perfect skiing. I mean, it's like, wow.
And you can go wherever you want because you're ski patrol.
Well, yeah, because I'm actually one of their trainers, so I can go wherever I want.
Nice.
So anyway, but I've been doing that for years. And people say, you do that from Texas? And I go, yeah.
Absolutely. That's great. So what about mental attitude? As it seems to me, like my grandparents' generation, they were mentally tough as nails. And then it seemed like my parents' generation, they were mentally strong. My generation seemed like a little less. And talking to some of the younger generations, they really seem to struggle with that mental toughness or resilience. And that could be my bias. I'm not saying it's legit, but how do you deal like mentally prepared, or you got this fire? Like, was there anything that you're telling yourself, failure's not an option? Or?
Well, it really isn't. And coming out of the military, and I'm an old dude, coming out of Vietnam, I've seen worse. So it basically, I don't get rattled very thing, and I try to stay calm, try to think through stuff, and that's what it's all about. I don't think you ever saw me really rattled at the times you worked with me at Harrison.
No, if I did, it was a few seconds here or there.
Yeah.
It was probably appropriate.
It was like, what? Then I have to reset my gauge a little bit, but like, what?
It was no. You're not easily rattled. The where do you think? What do you think the next generation of leaders? What's the biggest thing they're going to wrestle with?
Well, and here again, it's each generation is a little different, and I think communication. I mean, I've got nieces and nephews today. If I would call them, they won't return my call. But if I text them, I'll get an answer back right away. So the technology changes, and what bothers me a little bit about that is that you and I grew up communicating with each other across the table. Their communication is on a handheld device, and they're not getting all the skill sets that they really need to do to be performing. When I grew up, I had a lot of opportunities in corporate America to do many different jobs. A lot of those intermediate level jobs are no longer there anymore to really get the training that you need to do. So how do you develop the team, and how do they get the right leadership skills to really go forward? We've been very successful at M2 Global. About 24% of my workforce are former military. And during COVID, we really didn't have a whole lot of churn and no new people. Now that we're growing, the new company is growing, and I'm still there as their president for a transition period. And we're looking at doubling our sales here in the next 3 to 4 years.
Wow.
So we're looking to putting a new building in. We know we're going to have to figure out how to onboard new hires. And we're going to try to hire as many military as possible because they know what it's like to do a job, to get up in the morning and to show up. In some cases, I can't even get people to show up for an interview. It's a little different. Yeah. I've got this story about what a wake-up call for me was, and I knew it happened to me. I never realized it happened to my brother until we're doing an eulogy for my dad at his funeral. And I graduated from high school, and my dad says, Doug, I've got a high school graduation present for you. It's out in the garage. I'm thinking, he bought me a car. You know, I'm thinking, wow, you know. So I go out and the garage is empty, and I'm going, what did you get me, Dad? And he says, over in the corner. And I go over there. I said, that's a Foot Locker. I said, yeah, it's a Foot Locker. He said, why did you buy me a Foot Locker? For the following reasons. You're either going to college, you're going to the military, or you're going to need it to move out. So that's what you call a wake-up call, okay? And he did the same thing to my older brother, okay?
That's great.
So, but my dad was retired military at the time.
Yeah. So he had a way of getting your attention.
Oh, he did.
How's your leadership style developed over time? Where do you think?
Well, I mean, I actually, it's learning and getting feedback. GE sent me off to Crotonville, which is their campus, and to improve my interpersonal skills, because I was pretty abrupt with people, and I was always in a hurry to get things done, and I kind of, it's like a bull in a china shop. I'd run over things, you know, trying to get things done because I wanted to get, you know, promoted and move up. And then when I got involved with Harris, they came in with a whole different skill set, a lot of training on team building, team dynamics, Myers-Briggs, 16 different personality types. And that made me realize that everybody has a value. If you understand the 16 different personality types, it really helps you communicate and get things done. And even today, we did that with everybody at Harris when we were over there at the Farallon Division, and we're doing that today at M2 Global.
If you walk by my desk, next time you walk by my office, you'll see my ENTJ from my first Myers-Briggs that you sent me to 25 years ago or whatever. It's 30 years ago.
ESTJ, but anyway.
But that actually, it's funny you mentioned that there was a lot of life-changing and mind paradigm-breaking things that happened in those years at Harris, but probably none of them were bigger. A lot of big ones, but none were bigger than going through that Myers-Briggs and sitting in a room with a bunch of my peers, you know, and you know, my buddy Dale. He's very introverted, engineer type, computer genius. Being in a classroom setting drained him, but I never understood that prior to going to this training on Myers-Briggs. And so when we would get a break from a classroom setting or a brainstorming session or anything, he'd disappear off in the some corner, and at the time he smoked, and he'd have a cigarette, and he wouldn't talk to anybody, and then he'd reappear when it's time to start, and I always like, I need to go find him and talk to him because I don't want him to feel like he's alone. Well, after going through the Myers-Briggs, his personality type craved that aloneness for 15 minutes. He needed it.
Oh, yeah.
Because being in a classroom was such an extroverted, so I learned to leave him alone, and it actually improved our friendship and our working relationship because
made a big
I understood he needed that 15 minutes,
Besides the Myers-Briggs, as we developed these self-directed work teams, we'd play catch-ball. And we'd get a bunch of foosballs, and we throw it back and forth with each other to get people's opinion. If somebody got off track, then we threw balls at that one person. Everybody would get these foosballs thrown at them. And it changed people's ability to communicate. I got to tell you the story. I was in Toys R Us, and I had my shopping cart full of these foosballs, and I was checking out. And the lady behind me says, you must be having a party for all your kids. And I said, no, I'm buying these for work. And she goes, what? I said, yeah, we use them for in our team meetings. She said, that's got to be a fun place to work.
And back in the late 80s, early 90s, that was cutting edge.
It was cutting edge.
That was before Google and all those places were the cool place to work. But how do you define success?
Well, I mean, success for me, are you making any money? Okay, are you successful? Are you growing the business? Are you making a difference with your employees? Are you helping develop other people? Are you giving back to the community? You know, it's defined in many different ways. And it's all the above, to be honest with you.
So for you, if your people are growing, if you're having a positive impact on the community and the company's profitable, then that's success for Doug.
And you're involved in your church, you know, in your community. Like this year, I'm volunteering to be the chairperson for the San Antonio Manufacturers Association. It's a volunteer position.
You get installed officially next week, I think.
Next Wednesday, and then I'll have a 1 or 2 year stint. I mean, I can stay on for a year, and then the board can ask me to stay on for a second year if I want to do it. So I may do it 1 or 2 years. We'll just have to wait and see what I get done on the first year.
It'll be a fun year. And speaking of San Antonio Manufacturers Association, you're going to be launching your own podcast here soon.
Yeah, I'm going to be actually I'm starting in February.
Okay.
We're going to start off with 1 podcast a month. Eventually, we'll get it to 2 podcasts a month, and who knows where from there. It's going to be a combination of thought leaders in the industry, like Harry Mosier on reshoring initiative, bringing back jobs to the United States. It could be Made in America, the people in that group that have started this organization. It could be, and it's going to be also manufacturers in San Antonio, people that have been very successful, like Cox Manufacturing as a result. We'll get them in and talk. So the goal is to do 1 thought leader per month, and then the next month we'll do a manufacturing review of one of the key companies in the story and how they came successful here in San Antonio.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, Doug, it's been a pleasure having you on the show today. Thank you for your time.
Well, and thank you for inviting me. This has been fun.
Yeah, I've enjoyed it. Thank you, sir.
All right.